Hello and welcome, everyone coming into this very special civic conversation. This is focusing on the question, how do we teach what it means to be American today? My name is Rachel Davison-Humphreys. I am Director of Outreach at the Bill of Rights Institute, and I'm joined here today with two of my fantastic colleagues, Mr. Joe Schmidt. Joe, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Joe Schmidt. I am the Director of Programs here at the Bill of Rights Institute.
And Joe, I'm so excited as my co-host today. We've been collaborating for the entire 2 months that he's been working at the Bill of Rights Institute. Joe just joined our team and we're very excited to have him in his debut webinar with the Bill of Rights Institute. You can go find him on a lot of different platforms and engage with us across all of the different social medias, including for this webinar. So please, we have Q&A open. You can raise your hand, introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to hear who's here. And today we're joined in his capacity as our resident scholar, one Mr. Tony Williams. Tony, welcome.
Well, thank you. And we've been collaborating for what, 4 years now, I think.
Six, Tony, six.
So, oh my gosh, time passes. Well,
it was COVID.
Great.
It was a different time.
Yeah. Well, great to be on. And yeah, no, I'm a senior fellow here at BRI and happy to join you to discuss this really important new curriculum we're launching. So very excited.
Well, welcome to you and welcome to everyone joining us. Again, if you want to kind of introduce yourself in the chat, we'd love to know who's here. And if you have any questions, you can either type them into the chat or put them in the Q&A at the bottom. So the reason we're here is that the Bill of Rights Institute recently republished our Being an American curriculum, which was written in the early days of the Bill of Rights Institute about 12 years ago, 14 years ago, I believe, was our first publication of it. And when we published it, we designed the Being an American curriculum to really be a comprehensive introductory civics curriculum, written at about an 8th grade reading level, active pedagogies and engaged. And at the same time, we also published a Spanish language version of the resource. It wasn't scaffolded for language learners, but it was a Spanish language version. What we've now done is taken this resource, which a lot has changed in America and how we teach history in the past 15 years. So we've taken the resource and we've updated it. And that's been under the direction of Tony and the content team here at the Bill of Rights Institute. So we wanted to take a few minutes to ask this really important question of how do we teach what it means to being American today? How do we do it well together? And how can the Bill of Rights Institute support you as you have those conversations among your classrooms and with your students? BRI is here to help. We are providing resources for you all the time that touch on these really important civic conversations that you're having in your classroom. We recently published a landmark text called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, which is 400 different components across all of US history and most of government standards. You can find that on our website, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. It has a wealth of resources from across different perspectives. Over 90 scholars contributed to it. Tony was a lead author on that project as well. And then most recently, just so you know, in case you're not aware, in February of this year, we published Plainest Demands of Justice, Documents for Dialogue in the African American Experience, which is a primary source-based look at the African American experience through, like I said, over 90 different primary sources from Black voices or the conversation that was happening with Black voices throughout American history. So BRI, we're having these conversations, we're helping you have these conversations. And we wanted to start off today with asking Tony kind of what the ideas were behind our update of this resource. And then Joe and Tony and I will all talk a little bit about how to have these conversations in the classroom. And again, we want to hear from you. So if you have any questions as we go through the conversation, please type them into the chat or share them in the Q&A. So first and foremost, Tony, or actually, I think Joe, go ahead. I think you're gonna take it away with the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and welcome everybody. Tony, Rachel did a great job laying out like all of the work BRI's been doing, right? And there's a lot of work in there. So my question for you is around, with all the work we're doing, why being an American, why the update now? What inspired the movement to update it? And again, that's a lot of time and energy. So why this? Why now?
All right. Well, being an American always was a very vibrant resource for teachers and students, and it's focused on the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, kind of these founding documents and founding ideals and civic virtues that try to help us answer in the classrooms, what does it mean to be an American? Now, as we all know, Americans are pretty divided today, right, over a lot of different things, and we can talk about that. And I think one of the important reasons philosophically of redoing this curriculum to update it and again sort of bring it into a little bit more modern period from 12 years ago is to provide the means by which, again, have those conversations about what it means to be an American. This is sometimes up for debate, and there's kind of contested issues that divide us, but we want to look at those basic things that unite us as Americans, that can bring us together, that can help us restore those civil conversations and sort of help us get back to having that common identity, whatever our sort of differences over politics and culture are.
And those, I mean, let's talk a little bit about those kind of guiding ideas. So the course is 11 lessons. They're designed to be very modular. They're designed so that you don't have to use the whole resource in your classroom. You can pick and choose even the different activities in the lessons. And what we did with the update, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that, is make sure that we were using scaffolding for learning differences and learning needs. That was part of the update, was to help really understand these resources. Tony, is there a particular resource that you think in there that we should highlight right now? So we have American Principles and Virtues is one lesson, Civic Virtues is another. Then we go through, again, kind of the American history greatest hits, right? Enlightenment and Declaration of Independence, and really looking at the nature of equality in the Declaration. And we actually have 3 different lessons on the Declaration: the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Supreme Court, American heroes, past and present, and the Capstone Project about being an American. But for right now, you know, things are happening in the Supreme Court. What would you say would be one of the most important lessons that came about through the redesign?
Right. Well, all of those are important, right? As you're out there, like, wow, how am I supposed to distinguish because they're all important? You know, I think that the Declaration really kind of pops out, I think, as really illuminating those basic ideals, right? That basic yearning for self-government and those rights of liberty and equality and having a just political order. You know, I think we all have a common yearning for these things. And again, I think that by discussing these principles and ideals, it can help restore civility, right? Because we'll have common ground for conversations, right? We may differ over politics, one side or the other over policies, but we'll have that common ground. And as we start to dialogue about these things, I think it'll be easier for us to understand the other person's point of view if we start with that shared set of ideals and principles.
Well, Tony, I don't think it was fair that Rachel put you on the spot, because there's so much in there. So I agree, like picking the most important, picking the favorite, that's tough. So I'll give you a different one that might be a tough question though. So all of those things are really important to have a conversation about, even when it's a contentious, tough conversation. Why do we have to have these conversations? All of the ones you just listed. Why is it essential that we are having these conversations about what it means to be an American now?
Right. Well, I think it's because, as I alluded to earlier, you know, I think we are really deeply divided, right? We even see it just recently, you know, whether Elon Musk is buying Twitter or this release of the Supreme Court abortion case draft decision. We see it right down to, as I like to say, our cars, our coffee, and our burritos. I mean, and the companies and so forth, and what was happening to Disney in Florida. I mean, there's just a lot of contentious issues, and the Twitter mobs kind of go crazy. And I think a lot of ordinary Americans inside the classroom and outside the classroom are just kind of, stuck in between, and they hear all these contentious voices. And I think that what we're trying to offer here is a way of looking at what it means to be an American, to restore civility to the conversation, to restore maybe a little bit of sanity, to maybe see some more common ground than we are right now, because I don't think we are listening to the other person. We don't see that common ground as Americans. But if we can see that we have a common spirit, a common set of ideals, and a common purpose, right, in governing ourselves and in the common good, related to all these, founded upon these principles and virtues, I think we can have a healthier civil dialogue. And that's what we're trying to do, is promote a healthier civil dialogue inside the classroom and hopefully broadly outside the classroom as well, so that our policy debates, our culture wars can be tamped down a little bit, and we can just all see that we're all trying to achieve the common good. However, we may have slightly different ways to get there.
So I think that that's really comes out in the resource, right? So as I said, there are 3 different lessons on kind of the Declaration, coming at the promises of that declaration in a number of different ways. And in the lesson on the fragment on the Constitution and the Union, in lesson 6, which is an apple of gold in a picture of silver, we have an excerpt from Lincoln where he says, "Without the Constitution and the Union, we could not have attained our great prosperity. There is something back of these, entwining itself more closely around the human heart. And that something is the principle of liberty to all. The principle that clears the path for all, gives hope to all, and by consequence, enterprise and industry to all." And I honestly, I have never read, I have to say, I had never read that excerpt from Lincoln. And as I was going through the resources in this redesign, I was struck by the power of the unifying idea that liberty for all being a foundational principle, however well or not well we've lived up to that ideal, really is a central theme to the lesson. So there are a bunch of new components that were in the resource. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking behind these components and how they were designed to facilitate these essential conversations?
Right. So we pretty much totally redesigned it, and we have introductory essays really written at that middle to high school level that we tried to make it very readable. These somewhat complex ideas of the Enlightenment and self-government and these constitutional principles, but then also to have some really vibrant activities and lessons for the students. And really we not only have the 3 founding documents, but then also these civic virtues, which I think really can help the students put themselves in the place of these well-known and also lesser-known individuals, to see how they practiced prudence, how they practiced moderation, how did they demonstrate courage and resilience, all of these civic virtues that promote a healthy civil society. How can they emulate them? And then, of course, we have the capstone project at the end. So we really try to develop it along the way to have a lot of different components that teachers can go in and use however they see best fit in the classroom.
All right, Tony, I need to know. I'm sorry, I let you off the hook the first time. I'll ask it. I was listening to you talk about all those pieces that we put in, right? And the excitement there is obvious. You're very happy with that work. You love the work. Rachel asked for the most important. I will ask you, what was your favorite, you, Tony the Scholar, in doing this work? We heard that great quote from Lincoln that Rachel gave us. What was your favorite piece in there to work on? And why did this catch your attention? And maybe why even should teachers tune in and take a look to that one as well?
Yeah, again, it's really hard to narrow it down, but I think that I really enjoyed. I'm going to do two. I'm going to fudge a little bit and do two real quick. One is on how James Madison created the Bill of Rights. We have an essay and lesson on that, and really looking at Madison's dedication to preserving the people's liberties in that those formal amendments, which became the Bill of Rights in the first Congress, when they had made a sacred promise in these ratifying conventions to pass a Bill of Rights. When they got to the first Congress, there was a lot of other business going on that they wanted to just forget about it. But Madison wanted the people, the American people, to have that allegiance to the new government, to fulfill their promises, and also to protect their rights. And he thought it would really promote amity and friendship and moderation, and promote sort of constitutionalism, that affection for constitutionalism among the American people. So working on that was great, and really working on all of these civic virtues and how individuals demonstrated them in their own lives. Those sort of character sketches, character cards, are just so fascinating because they inspire me, and I think they'll really inspire the students as well. How Elizabeth Eckford and the Little Rock Nine going to school, whether it's George Marshall or Dwight Eisenhower during World War II, John Quincy Adams fighting against the gag rule on anti-slavery petitions in the 1830s and 40s, and a number of others. The Code, Wind Talkers in World War II. I mean, all these are very, very inspirational stories. And so working on that was personally inspiring for me, even while I was writing them.
Was it tougher to answer favorite or most important?
Both, because again, I think it's such a vibrant resource that I think everything in here is really important for students and teachers, but then also very interesting and compelling as well.
And I think as you dive in, one of the things, so I've been adding links in our chat as we've been going, just to make sure that I'm touching on all the resources Tony is linking to. But actually, one of the kind of most robust improvements that I would say we made with this resource is really the layout. As we did the content update, we also did a learning design update on the resource. So as you look through the resource, you can see we have guiding questions that have I can statements, so students can assess their own understanding. So Emily, you mentioned that you're a high school SPED teacher. I want to tell you that this resource, I think, is a really great resource for students with learning differences, because we have so much scaffolding built in. So if you look, I'm just going to drop even the link just to the PDF version in the chat. But if you look at this PDF, you can see there's the guiding question. The introduction is very short. The essential vocabulary. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to jump in really quick. Rachel, you've been doing for hosts and panelists. They haven't been able to see any of the links. So
I messed up. Thanks, Joe. As I'm running through it, I get all red. I'm sorry. As I'm running through it, Joe, do you mind copying those and putting them in the regular chat? So you have the introduction, you have this essential vocabulary, which is very clear and cogent explorations with some questions about the essay that they just read, or the short paragraphs that they just read. And then when you get to the excerpts, they're very clean on the page. So they're chunked already, so you can assign them independently. They have note sections on the side, and then there are comprehension questions right below. And all of these are fillable PDFs. So one of the things that we did throughout, again, the redesign of this resource was really making sure that we are able to serve the needs of lots of different learners with these most important ideas about what it means to be an American. Tony, was there anything in that process that helped guide your thinking around how we're having these conversations and that kind of redesign or scaffolding process that kind of you have thought about differently or improved in your own kind of learning design as you went through the process of working on this project?
Yeah, I think so, because what it did is it forced me and the other team members to be, very concise in our thinking and really take some of these complex ideas about the Declaration and Lockean ideas and the Enlightenment and ancient thought and the Declaration, Constitution, Bill of Rights, and we're pulling in resources from James Madison and the Federalist and Lincoln and Frederick Douglass and all these great thinkers about the American system, and it forced us to be very concise and select those primary sources which really show the essence of these ideals, and to write very cogent, very concise essays. And so all of our thinking was really geared towards students in terms of saying, well, they might not read all 85 Federalist Papers, but here's some of the essentials that we can help distill for them. Here are some of the essentials that will foster a beneficial conversation and is sort of a chunk or an amount that they could handle, and that would be enough for them to grapple with.
And so those conversations, we built the resource to have them, but it's a different task to take those and have them in the classroom, especially with the way that things are right now for so many of our students and our educators, for our entire country, to try and have difficult conversations or conversations that have any contention within the idea, any tension within the ideas, is hard for teachers to do. Luckily, we have a ringer at the Bill of Rights Institute. Joe just published a whole book on civil conversations. So I wanted to give you a few moments, Joe, to talk about the conversations and the importance of having them in their community.
Well, I always like to say when people are here starting to even just listen to talking about these conversations, that's really such an important first step, is acknowledging that they need to have them, because as Rachel's alluding to, there is a lot of tension politically. There's different bills being passed in different states. You have to, think about who your students are, who your families are, where you're living, what is your own personal beliefs, what does that mean? And it is tough. And so we talk about, it really takes a little bit of courage on the educator's part. So thank you for being here to engage in this conversation, to just even start down this path about ooh, I might want to have a conversation, because it does matter. It really does matter in a bigger sense, not only just for you and for our students, but I think just in our communities overall. And that's our school community, the climate that our students are walking, from classroom to classroom each and every day. When they leave the walls of our schools and go out into our communities, there's that public pressure, and then the world, they're living in outside of the school day, and will eventually graduate into and live into. And there's so much out there that we really do need to take some of this on, because there isn't a lot of places anymore where we have that shared space where, all of these different opinions do come to the table in a place. We're self-selecting so much in terms of who we hang out with on social media and in real life and different groups and news and stuff like that. So it really is this really important responsibility for educators. Now, the great thing about being an American is it tackles some of the things we would advise for teachers to do, is make sure we have a shared understanding of what we're talking about. And so being an American provides you some of those ideas. What are we actually talking about? And you hear Tony talk about, some of those character cards and those different pieces. It allows you to talk about those things. Here's what it is in kind of, I don't want to say a controlled situation, but a shared situation of, oh, here's what we're talking about. Here's the topic at hand. And then it aligns in to why we're doing this, right? It's a curriculum piece. It's meant with certain outcomes. There's skills to be practiced in there. We're looking at primary sources. We're engaging in inquiry. And that's what we want to ground all this work in, because that's the place where the educator's role does come in. It's to build an understanding where we're talking about an outcome that's not dependent on you believing something or you having a certain take on something, but it's having the conversation where we explore. I'll continue the example of Tony was talking about those character cards, right? We're exploring the character. That's the reason for the conversation. It's not about saying, here's the end result that you have to get to. And then when you have that curriculum in place, right, it guides you. So as an educator, if you say like, okay, so why are we doing this? Oh, well, we have these outcomes, it aligns to these standards. It's really good quality learning. And that helps build that place for you. So I'm wondering, Tony, if you're hearing this and thinking about these places in the curriculum, how do you see kind of that progression of these essential skills that we build in the conversation, right? We don't just have the conversation to have the conversation and move on. We have the conversation because we want some learning to take place. So how would you see the revised Being an American really helping educators have that clear purpose when they're having these conversations?
Right. I think it actually relates to a little larger issue that Rachel had alluded to earlier, that, whether it's with plainest demands of justice or our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, U.S. history textbook, a lot of the work we've done with the civic virtue in our various curricula, that these are not easy conversations to have, but BRI has always sort of courageously entered the fray and said, no, you should have these conversations. Don't shy away from them. These are essential conversations. But I think the secret is we don't tell students and teachers what to think, right? We provide resources, particularly those primary sources. And, we ask, I think, good and at times provocative questions to encourage thinking and deliberation, but then also discussion and debate over these topics, right? So whether it's race with plainest demands of justice, whether it's constitutional principles, founding documents, what it means to be an American, character and civic virtue in the Being an American update, or the other tough questions we've tackled, we're encouraging, we're fostering conversation by providing those resources and some scaffolding, right? And essays and other materials just to provide some background. But then we encourage the teachers and students to deliberate over them. We provide the questions. We don't always provide the answers, right? Because this is a conversation.
And I know Rachel's doing a great job. She's getting all those links in. Rachel, I'm going to give you notice. I'm going to come back to you in a second because I'm curious, your thoughts on being an American and what it means for these conversations. But I'm going to give you a moment to think about it because I want to ask Tony one more question as our resident scholar. The Constitution, right? The founding documents that you've talked about have some inherent tensions in them. Mm-hmm. That we still have 250 years later, as strong of a documents as they are in the founding, they do have the tensions in there that we can't just say, oh, well, we're not going to talk about it. If we're going to talk about the Constitution, we do have to talk about some of those tensions. Sure. This is part of some new professional development we're rolling out this summer called Constitutional Conversations. And I'm wondering, Tony, in hearing that, what are some of those tensions you see in the let's pick any of the documents, I'll let you have your pick, that you would see as like, if you're gonna teach this, you do just have to recognize that the founders did build some of this in. So what document would you like to talk about and what are some of that tension?
Yeah, I think broadly in each of these documents there is tension, and we don't shy away from that. For example, all men are created equal. Well, what does that mean even today? What is equality, right? And we help foster a conversation around that. We provide a few ideas, but we also understand that in these discussions about income inequality or political equality or in other situations in our society, these are contested ideals, right? What does it mean to be free, right? What role should the government play in those ideals of liberty and equality? What is a just social order? What is justice, and in what situations are people enjoying or not enjoying justice? So these are all questions swirling around our society today and in recent years. And those are the conversations that we want to help encourage in the classroom between the students themselves and with their teachers. So those important questions and tensions are embedded in the Declaration, in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights itself. And they have been, right, for 250 odd years. Those debates have perennially come up throughout American history. I can give any number of examples from our past, but they continue to animate our discussions and sometimes our divisions today as well.
Rachel, your thoughts? We've had you silent there for a little bit. We're going to bring you back into the conversation.
Thanks,
Another
gentlemen.
one of our resident experts. She always downplays her own knowledge. So being an American.
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I really appreciate about this is the centrality of the texts. So something I think a lot about is that it's really hard to have conversations about abstract ideas without something that you're all referring to. And so one of the things that this resource does so well, and I'm just constantly impressed every time I review the different parts of it, is how well the primary sources are excerpted so that they're still approachable to students, but it's the language that was used. And there's this really great lesson in the Guiding Star of Equality, which is lesson 5, which is just an overview of the documents themselves and how the Declaration of Independence has been used as a touch point to advocate for equality throughout American history and world history. So we touch on what I also find really compelling about this resource is how much it puts in perspective the American project. And I think that often, we all do this. History is anything that's more than 3 years old for our young people, right? And so putting things in perspective for them, the 90s will always be 10 years ago. I don't care what anyone tells me, but putting things in perspective for our young people is really hard. In addition to having those really difficult abstract conversations about ideas like equality and liberty, we need to put things in perspective. So I think the two things that really are highlighted, well, 3. Number 1, the new lesson design with all the scaffolding and the excerpting is really, really powerful. The way that we use those primary sources to anchor the activities and the conversations in something that can be referred to. So the thing about it is, as much as those civil conversations, you have your self-reference, the reference to your own experience and the reference to what you said or what others said, it's hard to keep track of that often throughout a conversation. So having an anchor text that students can put their own understanding in comparison to is really helpful. And those are just throughout the resource. And then lastly, making sure that students understand or helping students clarify their understanding of the US project towards liberty and equality in world history, I think is also sprinkled throughout this resource in a really compelling way that I really think students will be able to appreciate.
Tony, you almost apologized earlier for having 2 answers. Rachel just gave 3. So
don't constrain us. Don't constrain us, Joe.
I think we have to go. Somebody's got to keep track here, and so I'm just here to help. Just here to help. Just like BRI is just here to help as well. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But Tony, okay, so what is something you haven't gotten a chance to speak to yet? We talked about some really big overarching ideas of the why the project was redone. We talked about the thread throughs that make it go. We talked about your favorite. We talked about the most important. What's something that you want our attendees to know about being an American, whether the curriculum itself, which I'm thinking is going to go where you're going to go, but we're also just asking the question, what does it mean to be an American? So what's something you want to add?
Well, I think the philosophical point, I think I'll trick you there, and I was going to say something about the curriculum, but I think just philosophically, I think that we can really, I think, be guided towards some greater unity if we really recognize, you know, that America, you know, our national identity, our common identity is really one rooted upon these ideals, right? It's, you know, being an American is not about being a particular race. It's not about following a particular religious persuasion or no religion. It's not about a certain ethnic identity or speaking a certain language or what have you. It's about embracing an idea, right, of liberty and self-governance, right? And if we can, I think, recover some of that common identity as a people around an idea of liberty and self-governance and equality and these other principles and civic virtues, I think we can go a long way towards restoring some sanity in how we understand politics and how we understand the vibrancy and our relationships in civil society. As you said, stop sort of living in echo chambers and get out and meet your neighbor and talk to them and see that they share just a lot in common with you. As Americans, and you may have voted for different people, you know, in the last election or what have you, or maybe one person, you know, is on one side of the aisle or the other. But we're in you know, in the end, where we have that spirit of a common purpose, where we're all united around, you know, heading towards supporting the common good.
So I'm going to jump in there and build on Tony. I've been able to have more I travel a lot for the Bill of Rights Institute during our high seasons, which, as Joe is learning, are regular throughout the school year. And I had the opportunity to chat with people more on the plane than I have in the past couple of years. And one of the things that's come up when they learn that I'm involved in civic engagement is this overwhelming sense of fear that they have. It's come up in a number of different conversations from a number of different, you know, people of a variety of different backgrounds. And I think that one of the things that is so powerful, both about this curriculum, but about the approach that BRI takes when talking about what it means to be American, is to build on what Tony said, this idea that fundamentally America is a propositional nation. We are a nation built on the proposition that all men are created equal, and men meaning all people are created equal. That is a powerfully transformative idea. And it's an idea that all Americans should be able to galvanize around, to discuss openly how we go about that equality. That's part of the tension of being in a democratic republic. But the idea of equality is a unifying idea. And that idea that we are a propositional nation, a nation built on a proposition, as opposed to the list of categories that nations had been built on in the past, right? Tony listed them out. For all of human history, that's what a nation was, until the United States. And the United States said, that's not how this nation is going to be founded. That's how the states were founded. That's how the colonies were founded. But that's not how this nation will be founded. This will be a United States around a proposition, an idea. And that helping students understand that under everything, everyone is often looking for more equality, looking for more freedom, is a powerful tool lens through which to see how people are struggling. And I think that helping them have that tool in their toolbox, saying, what is it that they're actually asking for? What freedom do they want? Do they want And sometimes they want freedom from want, but what freedom are they yearning for can help them clarify where the tensions are.
You know, there was a question I'd like to address in the chat. Someone who was it Jennifer asked about the contention that America was founded on Judeo-Christian values. It is something we talk about in the curriculum. The answer is yes. That was certainly an important part of creating founding ideals, but so was ancient philosophy and history. So were the ideas of John Locke and the Enlightenment. So was the English experience and traditions, as well as the colonial experience. And all these differing strains of thought and traditions were united in the minds of the founders, the framers, Americans at the time, as they built a new order for the ages, right? And so they created something unique, as Rachel said, and a society dedicated to certain principles and ideals of an aspirational quality, right? Perhaps never fully and perfectly realized, and yet, you know, exceptional in a lot of ways in the world, both then and now.
And we appreciate that question. And I'm glad you snuck it in there at the end, because that's what we want to do. We are here to help. Our mission at BRI, Bill of Rights Institute, is to teach civics and to support you in the teaching of civics and whatever you need. So I know that we are right up against the clock, but I will thank Tony and then for his time, and I will turn it over to Rachel for her whatever she has for her closing.
And really, it's the same, Joe. You kind of you took it right to where it needed to be. We are here to serve you. All of our work rests on creating resources that are useful to you in your classroom. So as part of this webinar, you're now part of our BRI family. And so you will be hearing from us about all the different resources that we have available. We want to know what you're struggling with, what you need. We regularly ask for your feedback on social media, but if you want to send us an email, you can send it to info, and it will definitely, we read all of those, and it will find us, or reach out to me or Joe or Tony on Twitter. We're all on Twitter, and we'd love to talk to you about what your needs are, what you're struggling with, how we can better serve you in your communities, in your classrooms when it comes to teaching civics, because that's what we do. Citizenship is hard work. We're here to help. So I want to thank Joe for our first co-led webinar. Yay! And I deeply want to thank Tony. Tony is an anchor. He is a tent pole in the community, in our design community here at the Bill of Rights Institute. We literally could not do our work without his insight and his enthusiasm for our mission. So thanks, Tony, for being on this webinar with us.
Thank you, and for those accolades. And I'm just part of a great team, so I'll leave it at that. So.
And thank you all for your commitment, for taking time out of your precious days here at the end of the school year to think about these ideas with us. We really appreciate the work you do with your students and your commitment to improvement. So if there's any way we can help, we're here. And that is another Civic Conversations webinar. So thank you all. We look forward to hearing from you next time, and be in touch if you need anything. Thank you.